How are you developers? I hope you are well. Welcome to today's class. In previous classes, we said that elements are the building blocks of web pages. And today we look at how elements interact with other elements, and specifically we look at their display behavior. Every element in HTML has a default display value, depending on what type of element it is. The two most common display values are block and inline. In this class, we'll look at the difference between block level elements and inline level elements. So without much ado, let's dive in. Before we start this class, you can go to your repository that you forked, and if you are behind, you can just sync the repository. Then head to your Visual Studio Code and pull the changes so you can get today's notes. So let us go to our Visual Studio Code. When you pull the changes, you'll notice that you have a new folder there written 05 display, and that is what we'll be learning today. And inside the folder, there are two files. One file is the index.html, where we'll be writing our code, and the other file is the readme file, where we'll be referring to our notes. So now let us open both files and put them side by side. I'll just be using my Markdown previewer as we discussed about it earlier. Yeah, and I'll put the code here and the notes there side by side. So let's start today's class. So today's class will discuss the difference between block level elements and inline level elements. We'll start with the block level elements, and we'll know that the block level elements start on a new line and they add a space before and after the element. And by default, block level elements take up the full width available. We'll see that in action when we start writing the code. And examples of block level elements are the p tag and the ul tag. Those are the tags that I've talked about them, and they're block level. So now let's write some code and see what we mean by saying that they take the full width. So before we write our code, we'll use the correct way of writing HTML by including the head and the body that we learned about yesterday. So we said that you press Shift and 1 to get the exclamation mark, then hit on Enter to get the HTML boilerplate. So I'll just change the title to display, to HTML display. Yeah. Then we'll write our code inside the body of our boilerplate. So in the body, we'll write two tags, the p tag and the ul. So we'll write a p tag here and say this is a paragraph. Then below it, we'll create an ordered list there, and it will contain 3 items, just like we used the example on the other day that you're talking about the lists. I'll label them 1, 2, and 3. Then I'll save the code. So now let us go to the browser and see what we mean by saying that they take the full width. So I'll run my code by hitting on the Go Live button here on my VS Code. When you go to your browser, you'll see that the paragraph tag is here and our list is there. And you notice that the paragraph tag and the list, they stack on top of each other. They are not on the same line. They are on top of each other, and they stack vertically. And that is the default behavior of block elements. By default, they create a box and stack each other and stack on top of each other vertically. So when you inspect, let's right click and inspect this code. You'll see that when you hover on the paragraph, you can see it has a box. The orange part is the box. And you notice that the paragraph, the blue part, takes the entire width. The paragraph ends here. This is where the paragraph ends, but the width extends till the last part. And that is what we mean by saying that the block elements take the entire width. And that is the same case with the list. It creates a box, the orange part, and the blue part is the element itself, and you can see that it takes the entire width. It goes until the end of the page. And if we stretch our page a little bit, we create some space, it will occupy that space. You can see that the paragraph both occupies the space till the end of the page, and the same happens with the list. and that is the default behavior of block elements. They take the entire width that is available. Let us look at inline elements, and you can see the difference between block and inline elements. So inline elements, on the other hand, do not start on a new line, and inline elements only take up as much width as they need. Also, inline elements flow within the content and do not create a new block in the document flow. The common example of inline elements that you have already looked at them is the image and also the anchor tag. So let us write some code of the image and the anchor tag and see how they differ with the block elements. Before I write the code of the inline elements, I'll just put a comment here. We already learned about comments, and we said that comments are used to document your code. So I can just say these ones are block elements. The paragraph and the list are block elements. Then below the list, I can just write another comment there and say inline elements. And below there, I'll put the anchor tag. If you remember that the anchor tag contains the href attributes that specify where you want your link to take you to. So I'll just put ninjaprogrammers.com. I'll just copy the code we wrote on the links. I'll just copy this code here that links me to ninjaprogrammers.com. This is the code that you wrote on day 3. I'll copy that code and paste it here so that I cannot miss on the URL of ninjaprogrammers.com. Also, I'll just copy the code for images that you wrote, the absolute URL. I'll copy this one for the absolute URL one because I don't want to put the image in my folder. Then I'll paste it there below the anchor tag. I'll post my image there. I can just adjust the width and the height. Let's say the width to be 200 pixels so that it will not extend to the end. Okay, so now let us save our code and look at it in the browser. You can see that I've added 2 elements. One is the anchor tag, the link, and the image. This, you have said that these 2 are the inline elements. Let us see how they behave in the browser. So let us go to the browser and see how the links and the image behave. When you go to your browser, you'll see that the link and the image are beside each other, meaning that they did not create a space before or after the elements. That was not the case with the block level elements. You can see that the paragraph ended here and it created a space and pushed the list on the next line. But with inline elements, they just flow in the same line. They don't push the next element below. And also when you inspect them, let us inspect the link and the image. You can see that the link, first, it does not have a box. There's no that orange part that you're seeing in the block elements. And number 2, the blue part only takes the width that it requires. You can see that the text has ended with website, and there is where the width has ended. And the same case is with the image. It only took the space that it requires. You can see that it left some space here. You can see this space here is not occupied by the image. When you hover on it, you can see that the blue part ends with where the image is ending. It does not extend to the end of the screen. And that is why we say that inline elements do not occupy the full width. They only take the width that they require. And also, they don't start on a new line. They start where the previous element ended. So you can see that the link and the image are both on the same line. And that is how inline elements differ from block level elements. Now that you know the difference between inline and block level elements, let us talk about 2 essential tags that are often used for structuring and styling web content. And the 2 tags are the div tag and the span tag. So now let us start with the div tag or the div element. So the div element, or in div is short for division, and div element is a block level container element, and it is used to group together and structure contents on a web. Div elements are often used to create sections or divisions, making it easier to apply styles, scripts, or layout structure. Div elements do not have an inherent styling and are typically styled or formatted using CSS. So let us see how div elements look like in the code. So below the image, I'll write a comment there and say div element. Div element. You have said that a div element is just a container that nests other elements. So we'll just put div here. It has an opening and a closing tag. Then inside the div, you can just put any elements that you want to put there. You have said that div just serves as a container. Just I'll put a h2 there. Say second heading. Also, I'll put a paragraph. You can see that now the h2 and the paragraph are nested inside the div, and the div acts as a container to hold the two elements. And also you can see that in the notes that the div can take attributes, and in most cases div is used for styling. So this container, you can style this container using the same styles by applying the style attribute. You have already learned about the style attribute, so I'll just put here style attribute. You learned about it in day 1, and I can say the background color is, say, aqua. So when you save and go to the browser, you'll see how the div acted as a container to wrap the two elements, and the two elements will have a background color of aqua. But it is the container that the style is applied in, not in each element. The style is applied inside the container. And since the two elements are in the container, the two elements will have a background color of aqua. Let us see in the browser. When you go to the browser, you can see that the h2 and the paragraph have a container that is aqua in color. And also we have said that the div is a block level element. So the div takes the full width of the page. And you can see that the div acts as a container, and both the paragraph and the h2 have a background color of div, have a background color of aqua. But the background color was applied to the div, and that is how we use a div as a container to nest other elements. We have seen how a div acts as a block level container. Now let us look at the span element. The span element is an inline container element, and it is used to apply style or scripting to a specific portion of text or inline content without affecting the overall structure. Span element is handy when you want to style or manipulate a small portion of text within a larger block of content. Just like the div, the span does not add any styling. It is just a generic container. So let us see how the span looks like in code. To see how a span works in action, I'll write a comment below the div and say this is a span element. So you have said that a span element is an inline container. So to see it in action, first I'll create a paragraph and say that this is a paragraph then I'll nest the word, I'll surround the span element here. Then I'll put the word paragraph inside the span, like that. As we have said earlier, that a span is used to style a specific part of a text. Let's say in this paragraph, we want only to style the paragraph. So you can surround the paragraph inside the span, and you can add the style attribute here, because you have said that the div and the span are mostly used to apply styles and scripts to a text or any part of the element. So you can put the style attribute there, then say the paragraph to be color red. When we save, you can go to the browser and see how that looks like. When you go to the browser, you'll see that our paragraph is here. And you'll notice that the word paragraph itself is red in color. And that is because we put the word paragraph inside a container, and specifically the span container. And because the span container is inline, it did not put these other words to the next line, because you have said that the span is inline. So if you inspect this code here and look at this paragraph, you'll notice that this span here surrounds the paragraph and is the one that applies the red color to the paragraph using the style attribute. And since span is inline, it does not add space after the element, and that is how you use a span element. Div and spans are mostly used to style or add scripting to parts of a text or a block. Now we know about inline elements and block level elements and how inline differ from block. And we have learned about the div container and the span container. So let us learn two more attributes today. That is the class attribute and the ID attribute, and how the class attribute differs from the ID attribute. Both the class and the ID attributes are used to add additional information to elements, allowing you to target them and style them with CSS or manipulate them with JavaScript. So now let us look at the class attribute. The class attribute is used to assign one or more class names to an HTML element, and you can assign the same class to multiple elements, allowing them to share common styles or behavior. We have said that you can assign more than one class to one element. So let us assign a class to this paragraph element here. Let us call it class. Let us call this class highlight. And also let us assign a class to the UL, and we call it class blue background. I'll say blue BG. And I've said that we can have the same class in multiple elements. So this UL will have two classes, and if you want to add two classes to an element, you separate the class names with a space. So I'll put a space here, then write the class highlight. So you can see that the class highlight is in the P tag and also in the UL tag. And the UL tag has two classes. The first class is blue BG and the other class is highlight. Yesterday we learned about the style element, and you can use the style element to apply styles to an element. So we can put the style element in our head and say style. Then to select a class, use the dot syntax. So I'll say dot, then highlight to select the highlight class. Then I can apply a color of, let's say a color of that one, Tokiso. Also, I can just style the other class that was blue BG. Say dot blue BG and apply a background color of blue. You can notice that all the elements that have a class of highlight will have the color of turquoise, and all the elements that have the blue BG class will have a background color of blue. You can see how we have applied the styles to elements using classes. So let us go to the browser and see how this will look like. When you go to our browser, you can see that our paragraph now has the color of that color, and also our list has a background color of blue, and the text color is same as the color of the paragraph because they had the same class. And that is how you use classes to apply styles to elements. Now let us look up at the ID attribute. And you see that the ID attribute is used to provide a unique identifier to a specific HTML element on a page. And each ID value in a document must be unique, and no two elements should share the same ID. To see how ID is used, you can apply an ID to this H2 here. And you can say that the ID is equals to, I'll call it unique. because I've said that an ID is unique, but you can just give it any name that you like. Then to style the ID, you can go to our style attribute and use the hash sign. This sign hash, then I'll use unique. This hash is just to indicate that it is an ID that I'm styling, and I say the color should be to be red. And when I save, let's go to the browser and see how the ID applied styles to the h2 element. When you go to the browser, you can see that our second heading now has a red color. This red was applied using the ID, and the ID was used to style this element, and that is how you use an ID to style an element. Now we know how to use the class attribute and the ID attribute. So let us now learn about hosting, and we'll host our website on GitHub. So what I'll do, I'll just copy all the code that we wrote today. This code, all of it, I'll just Ctrl A and Ctrl C to copy it. Then I'll head into GitHub, create a new repository and paste the code there. Then we'll see how we can host a page on GitHub. Code. So to host your page on GitHub, you can just go to github.com. Then log into your account if you are not yet logged in. Then go to repositories. I'll just click my profile, then say repositories. Then I'll create a new repository by clicking on new. Then I'll write a name. I'll say test. Then I can provide a description that is optional. I'll just leave it as public. Then I'll add a readme here by checking this box. Then click on create repository. After I have my repository, I can just create a new file by clicking this add file button, then say create new file. I'll call my file index.html. Then I'll paste the code that we copied here. This is the code that we copied in our VS Code. I've pasted it there. Then I'll say commit changes. Now I have a repository that contains all the code that I wrote today inside my index.html file. So to host on GitHub, you can just click on settings, then go to pages, then here on source, click on, you have to deploy from a branch. I think it's the default value here, deploy from a branch. Then here on branch, it's currently none, select the main branch. Then here to write root, then hit on save. You'll get a notification that your GitHub pages source saved. And when you go to code, you'll see a yellow button here. And when you click on it, you can see the process is queued. You can click on detail to see the detailed information of how the hosting is done. The hosting can take, let's say, 1 minute, so let us wait for it. You can see it's performing some checks there. And once all the checks are complete, our page will have been hosted successfully. You can see now the checks, the build is complete. Let us wait for the report and the deploy is complete first. It will just take a few minutes depending on the speed of your internet. Now it's in the final stage here and it has completed to deploy. So if it has completed to deploy, if you go back to your code, you'll see there's a green tick, meaning the checks were successful and now your page is hosted. If you click on settings again and go to pages, you will find the link of your hosted site there. And you can copy this link and share to your friends, or you can just visit the site to view it. So if I view my site, I can see all the code that we wrote is now here. And this page is now hosted. And I can share this code to anybody and they can view the code that I wrote. And that is how you host your page on GitHub. Now that we know how to host our pages on GitHub, and we are at the end of the week, just following the course, note that at the end of every week, there is an assignment that you're supposed to do. And you can see the assignment. If you have the notes, you can go in the last page and see that there is a project there. And the assignment is to create a project that is similar to this one here. So just create a project that is similar to that and submit your GitHub link to the repository, and also host the page and submit the hosted link. And all submissions should be made to janjaprogrammers.com. So I'm eager to see your creativity and to see how you have grasped the content. So peace out. See you in the next class.